Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, that's good. Responsive classroom. Welcome to the Coolidge Corner School, soon to be the Florida Ruffin Ridley School, as of September 1st, 2020. Very exciting. Not only was this person a remarkable civil rights activist, she was a teacher. And that was a big plus in the selection process for this name. Welcome to the new school. This is the newest school in Brookline. We're very excited to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of, you will see, very interesting education issues, people who are experts in these issues. And I just wanted to welcome you all. If you have any practical questions, I'm the person to ask. I'm the hospitality manager, as well as a panelist. So welcome and enjoy the day. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben Kelly. I'm the co-president and board of the Brookline Parents Organization, and I'd also like to welcome you. It's been really great kind of working together with Lauren and Bob and some other people here, Tanya Paris and Mary Bertnall and some other folks to organize this colloquium. And I just wanted to give you my little brief idea I have about leadership. So I wanted to say first, I'm excited to hear from everybody who's come. Thank you so much to Ramon for coming up from New York, to all the superintendents, principals, teachers, and parents who are here for our panels today. Thank you all for coming. I'm really interested to hear the discussions that come out of what we're going to hear today. And I don't know how many of you know that when I'm not working on school stuff, I teach. But I teach this system of meditation and movement. It's called Bolo. I have a studio here in Brooklyn. The system has roots in Tibet. And we teach breathing, we teach stretching, we teach movement, and meditation techniques. And through all of this, we have this very simple code that I really like, because I think it talks about what it is to be a student and what it is to be a leader at the same time. So this code has it's just three things. It's discipline, respect, and humility, right? And I think it talks about learning, because you can't learn if you don't have the discipline to be there, to do the work, to be consistent. You can't learn without respect for what you're learning. Because if you don't respect what you're learning, why are you there? At the same time, if you're in a classroom with a group of people, you need to be respectful of everybody around you in order to make that process work. And then you can't learn if you're not humble, because you need to understand that there's something that you have to learn, and someone who can teach it to you. But I think this also speaks a lot to leadership, because as a leader, you need to be disciplined. You need to do the work. You need to stand by what you say, and all of those things. You need to be respectful to everybody who's around you, respectful of their own individuality, their own ideas, their own minds. And you need to be humble in that you need to know that you are not the source of everything, that everybody around you contributes so much. And that as a leader, you're helping everyone else to lead in their way and helping the whole organization that you're part of to advance itself. So I thought that was an interesting, I like that perspective on leadership. And I like this idea too, because I think that it's something that all of us have, at least a little bit. We all need discipline, respect, and humility. But everything that we can do, we can always do better at it. Each of us can be more disciplined. Each of us can be a little more respectful, and each of us can be more, whether we're learning, whether we're leading, whether we're just interacting with our friends and leaders. So thank you again, everybody, for coming. I want to introduce Dr. Bob Weintraub, who, as I said, Lauren and I had the pleasure of working with to organize this colloquium. And thank you all again, and enjoy the day.
Okay, this is the Wi-Fi number here. If you need Wi-Fi?
Yes.
I think that's important today. So I have the password.
Which
Coolidge
network?
Guest, Coolidge Corner School Guest, that's where it should pop up.
What is it called?
Yes.
What?
Coolidge, yes.
Coolidge, yeah. All right.
You know what Wi-Fi is, Mary? Okay, so it's Coolidge, it should pop up Coolidge Corner, CCS. And the Wi-Fi is the number of the school, 617, the password, 617-879-4, whoops, 617-879-440, where's Lauren?
4400.
4400. You okay? Just tell me if anybody got in. So it works.
Yeah.
Yeah? Coolidge Corner, 617-879-4400. Okay, so I want to thank the Brookline Parents Organization for working so hard to make this happen. I want to thank Boston University, Lula College of Education and Human Development for paying for this place, this whole day, including the food and the candy that's on the table, and paying folks who are going to present today. So thank you for you. This is about leadership. And leaders should know one very fundamental thing. So what I'm going to do first is ask Mary Birchwald, who was always one of our poet laureates, who wrote a poem back in the day that I think talks to what schools are all about and what leaders need to know. So Mary, can you come up and read your poem, please? Start with a poem, not bad. Mary Birchwald, former chair of the
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I just found out 10 minutes ago that I was reading this poem, so I wrote this a long time ago, and Ben was talking about humility, and I think this is definitely a case of teacher humility. Sometimes you think you know what you're about as a teacher, and you're not always right. It's called Parents' Night. One by one, the tidy classrooms across the courtyard are going black. Parents filter out toward their cars, and headlights flicker across the windows. But there she is at my desk, smiling out of a shapeless coat. It isn't just the heavy Russian accent that makes it hard. I lean my head toward what she has to say about her daughter Katya with, I see now, the same shy smile. Her daughter Katya, who too lingers at my desk after class. She burns a trail of smoky words. Katya loves reading very much. She has a problem with hearing. She wants to write like Tolstoy. She liked so much last year's English teacher. I thank him for the rest of my life. When she breaks off, eyes eager at my face, I pull my head back, clearing for a smooth landing. But the sentences I pave out about the course, about Katya's progress, somehow crumble and fall away. Her forehead wrinkles. She veers sideways and lifts off again, circling back over the territory, words thick and halting. I watch, but cannot follow, though I try until the halls are dark. On the drive home, the mother's words are large-winged moths that brush soft bodies against my hair and flutter thinly at the windshield. Suddenly, I see the nonsense of my replies. Please, she'd been saying, racing against the custodian, rattling his keys as he came, snapping off lights. Please, she had said, those keys jangling toward my door. Can you love my child?
Thank you, Mary. There's a book called Leadership Jazz, written by Max Dupree. He was the CEO, president of Herman Miller? Office. Is it Herman Miller? Hold on. Herman Miller. They made that comfortable office furniture. Anyway, He owned this company, he was the CEO of this company, and I asked, when I was the head of Brookline High, I used to ask every new administrator to read this book. Lots of people think that this book is a very important book on leadership, and I want to read the preface. It's short, but it's meaningful. Sure. Esther, my wife, and I have a granddaughter named Zoe, the Greek word for life. She was born prematurely and weighed 1 pound, 7 ounces, so small that my wedding ring could slide up her arm and her shoulder. The neonatologist who first examined her told us she had a 5 to 10% chance of living for 3 days. When Esther and I scrubbed up for our first visit and saw Zoe in her isolate at the neonatal intensive care unit, she had 2 IVs in her navel, 1 in her foot, a monitor on each side of her chest, and a respirator tube and a feeding tube in her mouth. To complicate matters, Zoe's biological father had jumped ship the month before Zoe was born. Realizing this, a wise and caring nurse named Ruth gave me my instructions. For the next several months at least, you are the surrogate father. I want you to come to the hospital every day to visit Zoe, and when you come, I would like you to rub her body and her legs and her arms with the tip of your finger, and while you're caressing her, you should tell her over and over again how much you love her, because she has to be able to connect your voice with your touch. Ruth was doing exactly the right thing on Zoe's behalf, and of course on my behalf as well. And without realizing it, she was giving me one of the best possible descriptions of the work of a leader. At the core of becoming a leader is the need to always connect one's voice and one's touch. Today, you will be listening to and interacting with some of the most respected and highly successful leaders from throughout the northeast part of the United States. Each one of them knows their voice and knows how to connect their voice with their touch. We begin with Dr. Ramon Gonzalez, who has a story, but let him tell the story. He's the founding principal of MS 223 in probably the most impoverished congressional district in the United States, in the Bronx, New York City. Ramon is going to speak to us, and then we're going to have an opportunity to think hard about what he said. We're going to do something that we did at Brookline High for a long time called a conversazione, and it's a pretty simple format. Ramon comes up and speaks, and then each of the tables has a conversation, a conversazione, about what Ramon has just said. And then each table comes up with one question, a collective question, that you will then pose to Ramon, and Ramon will answer the questions. And that is the first segment of our day. So it gives me tremendous pleasure to bring up my mentor, my mentee, former student, mi hermano from New York City, Dr. Ramon Gonzalez.
Welcome. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Ben, for and the Brookline Parent Association for welcoming me today. This is a great opportunity. I feel like I'm coming to a family reunion here because I know when I talk to folks here, everyone knows each other, and I love that sense of community. And it's something, that community is something I want to build in our school system in New York City because we're so large. New York City is 1,600 schools. So however you can understand that, I have trouble understanding. In the district that we're in, and it's one superintendent actually for all 1,600 schools, they try to break it up into these community school districts. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. With the idea that we're going to be able to get build some direct relationship with families and kids, and it often doesn't work unless it's planned. And that's part of the discussion today. how do we plan organization schools so that we can respond to our local community, right? So, as you can tell, we are a school in the South Bronx. We are a school, a very diverse school of probably 40 different languages are spoken in my school. Languages I didn't know existed. Native languages across Latin America, across Southeast Asia. And so it's fascinating when you sit there to communicate with families, the limitations you actually have to build community. So it's finding ways to make that community. Now Bob gave me the incredible goal of having this discussion in 15 minutes. I don't know any principal who can have this discussion in 15 minutes, but I'm going to try. I'm going to give it the effort. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. So our story, our school, to me, is a similar story that what's happening in Brookline, right? It's a story of equity. It's a story of empowerment. It's a story of innovation, creativity, and ultimately change. How do we make our schools reflect our communities? Often we have kids coming to schools to fit schools, or we should design schools to fit children. And that's something that we have been focusing on for the last 15 years at the lab school. And it's interesting, you know, when you look at my neighborhood, this is where I grew up. I live across the street actually from this building now, which was a huge development in my neighborhood because there was never a Latino who ever moved across the street. Is that fascinating? You know, you talk about segregation of towns, of cities. Literally the street was a dividing line in my neighborhood. But I want to say, and I've come to terms with this, that the change for me didn't happen in my neighborhood. It happened at my boarding school. I went to a boarding school not too far away from here in Concord, Massachusetts, called Middlesex. I was a boys club scholar, and the way the boys club did it was that you had to be both an athlete and a scholar. And the reason for that is because the boys club knew they were sending kids from very different neighborhoods, right? In the neighborhood I was in, 95% of the kids were Black or Latino. I was going to a place where I was the only one. Very different neighborhood, right? So the idea was we want you to be good at two things so that if you can't hack it, you can't make it in one of those areas, the other will sustain you until you can. So it's an interesting concept, right? The reality was at Middlesex, there were 13 other boys club kids before me, all failed out. I was the first one in 15 years to graduate, given that they had one every single year. But we've learned from that, right? We changed. Schools have changed from that time, where now the dominant program is called Posse, where you bring in a group of kids, because we learned you cannot stick one kid into an area that there is no safety net, right? So that's what today is about, right? Thinking about what can we develop, how can we sustain our leaders, and how can we adjust to changes in our society and in our country. I would also add to that what was different about Middlesex, for me it was a chance to breathe. See, the neighborhood I was in, every day I felt under pressure to get to where I had to go and get home. That was literally the game, is how do I get home without getting hurt, and how do I get back without getting hurt. Then I went to Middlesex, and I could take my time walking, I could take my time looking around, I could take my time reflecting. That concept is what I decided to create in the school I was developing. Because the community we developed that school in was still the same community. Still the #1 community in AIDS rate, tuberculosis rate, violence rate, worst precinct. How do you build that in a community like that, where you got to worry about when your kid leaves your school building, they may not come back the next day, right? Just 3 days ago, walked out in front of the school, 7 cop cars in front of the school. As soon as I walked out, this is at 4:30, where most people are in after-school programs. So again, how do we create an environment where our kids can be able to reflect, think, be creative, and feel like they have a chance to be whatever they want to be? That was the goal of the school. So we founded this school about 17, 18 years ago, and we founded it with the idea that if we can get all the adults focused on a purpose, we can move mountains. And it's hard to think in that way because you have 60, 70 adults in that building. How do you get everyone focused on a specific thing? It's a lot of work, right? It's coming to that every single day. And then at the same time, this is the balance. This is like dichotomy of leadership is the popular book out right now. How do you do it with also worrying about test scores, right? Here you want to build creativity. Here you want to do all these other things that extends kids' learning. But then you have this gorilla on your shoulder on test scores. And believe me, the most difficult schools have it the worst because everybody's expecting those schools to fail, right? So that's the environment we were developing. And the last thing is, how do you then leverage in that environment with those pressures, student voice? How do you let kids breathe, just like I wanted to breathe? So one of the books that I love is, hopefully some folks have read this, called Atomic Habits, very similar to Compound Effect, or another book similar about the same time. And the idea is that it's all about incremental change is the multiplier, right? Instead of trying to change all at once in 1 year, I'm going to lose 30 pounds in 1 year. It never happens, right? But if I can lose 1 pound every 2 weeks, I can lose 30 pounds in a year, right? And that's the concept of Atomic Habits. So how can we make these changes in what's happening in our schools to get this huge change in our culture? So, just to give you background, because I know that ideas of tests are floating in the background of all of us. We started out our first year when 98% of the other schools in New York City did better on the exam that year than us. Just so you know where we started, right? And so as we're designing this school, we said we really want to make sure we design a school that's purposeful. We design a school that is what kids want. A lot of times, again, kids are forced into schools where it's what the school wants, not what the child wants. And so we said, you know what? We're going to start with survey. Let's survey our kids and find out what they want. And you probably could predict what kids wanted in the school. Very similar all over. Kids wanted to learn how to make money. And kids wanted to learn about the latest technology. Sounds different than Brookline? I don't think so, right? And so we created this school called the Finance and Technology School. And we added that special word, laboratory. We added laboratory because we wanted people to realize this is not the finished product. This is constantly going to evolve and change. And for us as a staff, as a community, to be ready for that change. Right? We don't want to dust off those lessons from 20 years ago because it's easier. We want to keep adapting to the population that's in front of us. Our kids change. We have to adapt. So we started with this community asset model, which was, let's look at all the assets in our neighborhood, the institutions, the community assets, right? Churches, the individual assets, and figure out how to design a school that can leverage those assets, because we knew we had a huge resource gap. Like, I want to create the Stuyvesant. I want to create these incredible schools out there. I just don't have that budget. So how do we make this happen? So we looked at these 6 avenues of change, right? We looked at how do we make an authentic and rigorous curriculum? How do we challenge every single kid in our building, right? That requires a lot of work. How do we get every single kid noticed in the building? That requires a lot of adults being on. How do we make sure staff are talking to each other? How do we make sure that we are deepening relationships with kids as we're doing all those other things? It's a huge, huge commitment. And I'm going to tell you, this did not happen year 1. This did not happen year 2. I've been doing this for 18 years. Iterations, laboratory of change, right? I'm committed to it. And my staff is committed to it. So, first thing we looked at was we said, instead of trying to bring down curriculum for diverse learners, let's bring up curriculum, right? Very different, right? So we said, okay, we're going to start with one of the major gateways, algebra. And we're going to make a program called Algebra for All. We're going to add supports, we're going to add tools, everything to make sure all our kids are successful in algebra. I don't care if you come in with an IEP, I don't care if you come in with a different language, I don't care if you come in as a top kid. Everyone is going to get that algebra experience in the 8th grade. That was amazing. And why? Because we knew to get our kids to the most competitive colleges, we had to get them up to calculus, right? We had Cornell University come by our school 3 days ago, and they said, what the kids we want are the kids who are taking physics and calculus. Those are the kids that we're looking for. So if you want to come to Cornell, your program has to be designed around those things, right? I was telling Bob the other day, we have 3 kids at BU. The running joke from one of my colleagues in Boston was that it's easier for you to get kids in BU than for us to get kids in BU, right? So again, how do we design our schools with the end product to build up, right? We're 6 to 12. So one of those concepts was curriculum. And just so you know, for us, it's not only challenge, because we could make every class hard, right? It's not only challenge, it's supports. What supports are you putting into as a school to reach this? For us, that required multiple teachers in the classroom. So I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but you actually have 5 adults. It's like kind of where's Waldo, right? Circle the adults in that picture. There are 5 adults, I kid you not, in there, right? And that's how we're able to have that small group instruction experience. Because in New York City, we don't have the space to create large classrooms, large-sized classrooms. But what I can change is student-teacher ratio. And for me to get my teachers to be able to challenge every single kid, I have to reduce my teacher's load. So that was a commitment. The other piece of that was we had to increase the amount of planning time. So again, if you want teachers to collaborate, you got to make more time for them to collaborate. These were all investments. These things cost a lot of money. This is not cheap stuff. So it required us to then find partners outside the school to raise money to do these things. So that was another initiative. Innovation. We talked about staff collaboration. You know, it's interesting. I have a great staff, very friendly with each other, but if you ask my teachers, they will tell you they rarely have seen each other teach. Which is interesting, right? They'll hang out together before classes, they'll hang out together after classes, they'll eat together, almost never will watch each other's, they might even sit in each other's class every once in a while, but almost never will see each other's lessons. So one of the things we put together was an intervisitation expectation. Once a month, you're expected to visit a colleague's classroom. You can pick the classroom. I'm not going to tell you what classroom to pick. You pick the classroom, and you're going to give feedback to your colleague. I'm not, as an administrator, not going to see your feedback. This is how we're building communication and how we're challenging and supporting each other. So what was starting to happen was, it was much easier now to plan lessons because people actually knew what was happening in each other's classrooms, right? And what was also interesting was that we were able to do celebrations because people knew where kids were on their development because they would see them in other classrooms. And then we started cutting down on people being sent to special ed and these other subjects because teachers started seeing that same kid in other classrooms. So you started having this compound effect of changes in culture of the school, changes in how kids treated each other, because all the adults now were on the same page. And this just didn't stop at the school level. The same happened with colleagues as principals. Once this started happening, we also started visiting each other's schools. Same thing, nest. You had to nest in a school for a whole day to visit your colleague. So you also were learning from your colleague. You were bringing things back from other schools. And your colleagues, because they were expected to come once a month, would see if you were actually living the things you said you were living. So it was a great way to challenge us as leaders. Another thing we focused on was personalizing instruction. Very hard to do. And again, this didn't happen a year, it didn't happen in 2 years. This took time to grow. What does that mean, personalized? And we have a lot of definitions, I know. This is one of those words that I probably could ask everybody in this room and everybody might have a different definition of what that means. For us, it means challenging every kid at the level they're at. Right? How do you design curriculum to challenge every kid in your classroom at the level they're at? And I know some teachers will say, well, I got 30 kids in the classroom. How do I do that? And they're right. It's very difficult to do, which is, again, why we brought in other resources. So one of the programs we do is we train teaching assistants through a program called Blue Engine. And they are extremely focused on one area of instruction to get them to that level where they can actually have the knowledge to work with children, right? That program has allowed us to reduce the number of special needs kids in our school just with better instruction, right? Reduce the number of incidents in our school. And it allowed us to advance. I think last year we had 70% of our kids reach calculus. 70%, right? We're talking about high poverty, 96% Title I school, 15 years later, right? Having that long-term goal of what to expect. So I want you to show you, this also means that we have to change the idea of time in our school. And I will tell you, that was a major shift for both our parents, our community, and our staff. What that meant was our day, in order for us to get those kids to calculus, we had to commit to an expanded day program. We had to commit to an expanded year program. And I know you guys, the finance guys in the room are going, wow, that's a lot more money, right? I know, believe me. And if you look at this program, this is our expanded day program. You see we have intervention services for every kid in the school. Every kid is expected to stay. We have clubs for every kid in the school. All of these clubs are an interest by the kids. So when people say, how, my kid's not going to stay after school. Yes, they will if they have clubs that they want to do. Absolutely. That's very different than having a club because you have a teacher who wants to do that. These are what kids want to do. Very different focus, right? So, keep going. Remember, I have 15, 20 minutes trying to get this. Another piece is this concept of deepening relationships with kids, right? So, if you ask any teacher that has a struggling student, they would love to have an on-call guidance counselor. Somebody who can intervene if they can, so they don't have to stop instruction every time, right? And we knew that. Remember, part of our change agent was to think about both support and challenge. You can't have one without the other, right? You can't challenge kids and not have support. So what we decided to do was invest in guidance counselors, right? And I know you're thinking again, the finance guys are saying, wow, that's 80,000, 90,000, just take it up, up, up. This is becoming a private school downtown. How were we able to do that? We converted our guidance counselors to guidance supervisors. We enrolled students from the universities. We built in a curriculum, because that's one of the other issues of support, right, of what is happening in guidance, based on solution-focused methodology. The whole school was trained on that methodology, because part of that methodology is the guidance counselor goes into the classroom and observes what's happening. The guidance counselor gives that student strategies to work on, and you need everybody on board to support those strategies. Right? So it became a whole community effort around this social, emotional practice. And so, again, you have even more drops of special need referrals. You have more drops, because a lot of these small problems were getting dealt with a lot earlier. And it was creating less and less loads for the teachers in the classroom. So they were able to meet these goals of how to target, individualize, how to create individualized instruction with smaller groups of kids. And I should tell you, we have 14 guidance counselors, we have 700 kids, just so you know the numbers. Another thing we do, hopefully there's some math teachers in the audience that'll appreciate this. We also moved to a performance-based assessment system. So everything is guided by performance-based tests, right? So which means that kids have to show their learning, right? Not just doing an algorithm, but showing what that is. So a lot of that is grounded in real-world, authentic problems. So, you know, I had to have a giant page. All right, so here's one with parabolas, right? Asking kids to figure out how does this kicker, what kind of parabola would be necessary to solve this problem of how many kicks would it take and what kind of distance would it require, right? That runs, and we could run that down from starting in 6th grade through 12th grade, because again, we had to build these performance tasks so they sequentially align over time and with difficulty. We're trying to challenge every single kid and we're trying to get kids to a level that they can take the advanced courses. Again, we're talking the poorest neighborhood in the United States by census data. And we're talking about some of the most horrific social ills surrounding these kids. My school alone has 4 public housing projects that surround the school, and 1 in 4 kids in my building are homeless that come from a shelter. So if we could do it in my building, we could do it, we get 70% calculus everywhere else. The last piece is starting to see the community as an asset. For so many years, people saw the South Bronx as like, whoa. I used to get calls from the parents of my teachers who would say, wait, are you sure my kid can work? Is it safe? And not parents from the kids, parents from the teachers, right? So this was the condition that we were trying to set up so that kids, everyone felt safe. So one of the things we did was, we knew there was this literacy gap in the neighborhood. So again, leveraging the community, we asked all the vendors in the neighborhood to host book bins to provide access to books for families. So that's an example. This is a bodega, a 24-hour New York special. And you see in there the book bins that are going on. If you look closer at that picture, you also see what we call a call to reading, right? We send a phone call home to all the parents, and everybody is supposed to stop what they're doing, and for 1 hour we commit to reading as a school community. Right? That was a major way of building community in our school, where people would talk about it. Parents would send email. We asked parents to take pictures, and so we can put it on our website of you reading with your child. And we have, and yes, we have parents who don't speak English. How do we deal with that? We set up audible books where those books can be read to the child. Took an investment, took time. Where do we get the resources from? We partnered with another local school, a wealthier school, that was looking for community service to donate books. We've leveraged those books to give out to our kids. Leveraging the community as an asset, right? And I know Brookline has a lot of assets in this community, but let's leverage them. Partnerships. If you see there are about 20 partnerships here, there's probably an additional 5 or 6 partners. Everything from international trips, Broadway shows, doesn't cost the school anything, right? These are all things that we're using because the big concept for us, besides it being a resource gap, was it's an experience gap. There are different experiences that poor kids have that don't set them up to be competitive with wealthier kids because of those experiences. And so how do we have some of those experiences for our kids so they can compete, right? Everything from going to a Broadway show and having that discussion of what that is, right? Going to sports events, we take those things for granted. Going to overnight trips at colleges. We provide overnight busing for trips for colleges, 1 college trip for every single kid in our school over 4 years. That's a game changer. My kids now feel entitled. They're telling me what school they should go to and telling me what I need to do for them to get them there. Right? That's a very different child than the one that I was, where I was waiting for things to come to me and just accepting my fate. That's what we're talking about, the change. So, I know we got some folks who like statistics in the audience, so we'll throw out some statistics. You see where we started, 98%. You see the gradual. You see the increasement over time. There was a little dip. That dip was a change in test, just so you know. Now, what I want to show you is, these are 3 other world-famous, I said I want to put the names there. 3 other world-famous schools in New York City. Right? Do you see where those kids start at? They don't start at the bottom most places, right? Do you see where they end up? Pretty much flatline. Right? So I just want you to see the difference of what could happen when you have a staff that is focused, when you have staff that has time to plan, when you have a staff that has autonomy, when you have a principal that has autonomy. A lot of difference there.
Right.
Try. All right, so going back over these 6 innovative pathways. Again, authentic and rigorous curriculum, staff collaboration, personalized instruction. I didn't spend a lot of time on assessment. Assessment is very big in our school, which is different than testing. Assessment is, how do we leverage that in the classroom immediately? Not a test that we take twice a year, once a year, and we never really look at the adults because the results because those kids have left already. Right? We're talking about meaningful assessment. And then we talked about the last part, the resources. So this is our school today. United States, 83%, 66% New York City, 54% our current district, and for Black and Latino students in New York City, 20%. That's where our school is. It can happen, folks, if people are focused. So how do we do this in a centralized system? That's the big question, right? We have the most largest bureaucracy in the world, maybe. I would say focused leadership. You have to be so focused on this goal. And it took iterations. It took humbleness. As bold as I sound now, I learned a lot of lessons along the way. And we might take days just going over them. Principal autonomy. I hire, I fire, I do my own budget, I go out and raise funds, right? But I couldn't have these results if my hands were constantly being tied down, right? Parent advocacy, I'm always amazed how little we use our parents. I find it amazing. If there's anybody who wants to see the best for our children, it's our parents, right? And that means everything from, we've leveraged parents, and I know you guys have done similar things here, from everything from book buddies to internships to languages. We have a parent who's teaching Arabic. We have another one who's supporting our Mandarin program. You gotta leverage the parents. And then finally, marketing progress, celebrating progress. We don't do that enough, right? Every month we celebrate at our school. We might be celebration happy. It might be too much celebration, but our staff loves it. What I've learned from feedback, and I think this actually, our article came out maybe 6 months ago in the Harvard Business Review, is that feedback is great if people want the feedback. Works really well. But what people really want is to be heard, is to be celebrated, is to be listened to, right? So those are things that I had to learn. I wasn't trained at my principal program to know that. I was trained to run hard and run straight, right? I had to learn that along the way. But those are things that change the outcomes of our staff. We have one of the highest retention rates of all the schools in the Bronx. It does work with success, yes. It does work with kids being motivated to come to the school, but it also works with how we treat each other, right? So, I think this is what Bob wanted to, so I'll let you do it. So now it's your turn. I told you 6 innovative practices that we do. I call them pathways because they're iterations. But I'm curious to hear what you think about those. Maybe even how could they be applied in your area, if it fits. And Bob, I'll let you continue that. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So as Ramon was talking, I had about 15 questions I wanted to ask him because there's you brought up a lot of stuff. So your job now is 5, 6, 7 minutes. Talk amongst yourselves. Your table has to come up with one question for Ramon. Go.
A lot resonated with me because I volunteered to actually alongside school outside from there. Part of what I want to know more about, you mentioned about focused leadership and leadership innovation. I can tell you about the ideas about we want to how to leverage of iteration and especially, kind of like what are they able to reduce in the parallels of focused leadership. You have your own school and you have that I'm curious.
Yeah.
I didn't do the math exactly, but it's about that. Right. How does his budget compare to other years? How much do they spend?
So there's two things, right? So he has the autonomy to go and raise money. I think the guidance counselors, if I understood correctly, they said they trained the guidance counselors into guidance supervisors who were supervising students, graduate students, I'm guessing. They were doing face-to-face work. That was what I'm assuming. So maybe it's a combination of raising money and bringing this program. Yeah. But again, I'm making a lot of assumptions. Sounds like a parallel process. Right. Right. Yeah.
Which is unusual.
That's true. Which is right. Boredom, I have two others that are not related to resources. They're not directly related to resources. One is there a certain kind of teacher that, is this a class where only a certain kind of teacher thrives? And I was curious about that. I was curious about hiring. How we figured that out. And how often I write these things, implied in the duration of these things. So one was a question about that. And the other question, how does he hire the right people? Yeah, because I'm sure not every teacher would love to have other teachers coming in and giving you feedback, for example. Yep. Yeah, so how, right, so, exactly, and to fail and to have someone tell you, actually, you're a star at just developing relationships with people, during that lesson, or whatever that was one question I had.
Okay, another minute, got a
question. Might be harder, but any talk about a little bit more algebra. Sure. everyone did write it. It's hard to imagine alphas. I bet it's focused more than, right, I bet the magic pillars are focused. And my curiosity, so I'm just curious how they
So we're also moving on to the other thing is that
it might be really simple like that. Yeah. One.
I really like drawing this very much. Of the balance and it's super intense. I also draw to when
They may not use the same schedule. That's what I was, or they may have stipends. I mean, we have that. Stipends for teachers, classes, so maybe that. Just
Either way, it's fine. Actually, yeah, we can have a few. Yeah. The question gets asked I was gonna have John say.
Jonathan Golden, nice to meet you. So Brookline parent also works in the academy.
Thank you. Okay.
Bella.
That didn't work. Everybody's still talking. I know. A lot to talk about. Chill.
I give Helen a quick hug.
Will Carter has got a microphone, so if you guys have a question, the more enthusiastic you shake your hand, the voice will be nice. Will come over with a microphone. Okay, raise your hands if you want to ask a question. Right there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariah Nobrega. I see lots of people in the neighborhood in the movie here. I know. Hi. So our question from our group is, we heard about how you really had looked at making incremental change, and so our question was sort of a two-part question: is what do you, with what you might know about Brookline, see to be our what's a potential first good incremental step to take? And if you don't have the answer to that, how does a community go about, what do you see as assessing where the, what our first increments should be? How do we go about approaching that problem?
I would say that I'll just talk from our school's experience in terms of incremental change. I think student voice is critical. As many avenues to collect student voice and have them be part of the process in what kind of school it is. And measured, obviously, but I think that's a critical first step. Kids know what kind of school they want to be in, and we just got to open up ourselves to that, because some of it is critiques, right? And we have to be okay with that. And then some of it is also communication. Sometimes the kids don't see the whole picture, and it's up to us to help them see how things connect. I mean, wouldn't that be great to teach kids how schools work? That's a great thing for kids to learn. Because then they'll learn how to advocate. They'll learn how to leverage the system. Isn't that what we do? So I think as much as possible to have those opportunities, I would start with student voice first. And then just making sure we have time to plan for those outcomes. You gotta plan for it.
Thank you, Mariah. Next, raise your hands.
Hello, my name is Katie. I'm a current student at BU's Educational Leadership and policy program. So we were thinking about, you early on had touched on the safety piece, the emotional security, getting to and from school, what's happening outside of school. So we were curious what steps your school had taken to sort of, especially with the student homeless population of 1 in 4, I believe you said. So what things you guys did to help students feel both safe in school, but also in those transitional and out of school times?
I mean, there's so many things we had to do. Started with just meeting with knowing who the local police officers are in the neighborhood. Making sure that we had a corridor for safety for our kids. We have a uniform policy in our school. I like to say that it's about marketing our school, but it's just as much about safety. I want to be able to know where my kids are in the neighborhood in case, frankly, some adult has to intervene. And so it's building all these layers, a safety net, if you will, to make sure that's there. And then within the school, having opportunities for kids to voice so we have advisory groups from 6th grade through 12th grade. We have town hall meetings, so there are multiple avenues for kids to voice their concern. We teach kids how to be empathetic and compliment each other, very important. We practice the same rule that, and it is a rule, I talk to my staff about, which is 3 compliments for 1 negative. We do it with the kids. And so it's just building, constantly reiterating that culture of positivity and action-based, right? And if there's an issue, we ask kids to write proposals as to how to solve issues. We have one of our performance assessments, I was talking about math, one of our performance assessment is creating a policy brief and leveraging your allies and being able to defend that policy brief. So to be able to do that policy brief in the 11th grade, you got to start teaching smaller increments of that early on, so that kids are, so it might be something in 6th grade where they're writing to the local congressman or, I'm not sure, alderman, I'm not sure how it works in Boston, Brookline. And so it's just having those experiences, and then finally having surveys of kids, right? Letting kids have, so we have anonymous, our council have sustained an anonymous bullying reporting site. And so that way kids feel empowered that if they have issues, they don't keep it to themselves. These are all avenues we've used to set up those conditions that kids felt safe. And what's interesting, I was having a discussion with some of the kids, with my seniors yesterday actually, and we were talking about the uniform. And they said that in the 7 years they've been at the school, they've never had an incident outside the school. And I think a lot of it has to do with that uniform. I think people see them as serious kids. Like, kids are with a purpose. They are going about their business, and I think that gives a sense of confidence to the kids. I mean, you see it when they walk around, they walk very straight and, you know, say what you want about that, but internally, you can tell that kid feels confident about themselves. And then finally, our curriculum supports it, right? So part of our curriculum is kids have to speak publicly. My kids are great speakers. They have to know research. They have to be able to write well. That starts in the 6th grade. That is our curriculum. That's not a state curriculum. That's our curriculum, right? Does it ripple into state standards? Of course. Well, state standards doesn't have those things. But it's making sure that our kids can articulate for themselves, because I want our kids not to be victims. I want them to be advocates. So if you desire that, you got to build the skills. It's not going to happen in 1 year, in a 6-month course, right? You have to build the skills over time.
Anybody have a question on money? I was waiting for one of those. Anybody have a question on money? Back there?
No,
John?
it's not. Mine's not money.
It's good.
Now that you mentioned it.
Suzanne Frisville, actually on the school committee in Brooklyn, so thank you very much for your presentation. The struggle I have a little bit is that you mentioned that you have a lot of outside resources, and we talk a lot about equity among our schools around money. So if a school gets grants or they have partnerships, that other schools that means that other schools may not have them. In other words, the pie is only so big. And I just wonder if you could talk about the equity, the money that your school gets, that means maybe other schools do not get. Thanks.
I think leaders as well have to make a commitment to the community. I'm a strong believer in that. I mentor every year 5 to 6 principals and 3 to 4 APs every single year. Right? I teach them how I do things. They walk my school. They sit in my building. You have to do that. If you're about community, if you're really about equity, you have to make that extra step of teaching others. If you hold it to yourself, you're not about equity. Right? So we have to say, is that really our commitment? So I know this young man over here does an incredible job at the, how much money do you really use? So that's a person, if I'm at another school, I'm sending them to him. I want to find out his secrets on how he's doing things, as opposed to say, you know what, you're a bad person because you raise so much money. Right? That's not helping anybody. Right? And if anything, that's dissuading him from doing a great job. So instead of doing that, let's compliment him by having other, and as a community, we could also raise money to support Anthony reaching out to others, because it's work. I mean, let's be honest about that. For him to do that, that's work. But then we should support that. We should make it very easy for him to share his knowledge. And also to laud him for doing that. Right? We want a community, that's back to the you gotta cheerlead people. Like, we need to celebrate that. That's a great skill that I wish all principals had. Not every principal wants that, because that's more work. Right?
So, but also, is it right?
Oh.
But also, is it right?
Is it right?
Well, you went to Middlesex, that's
Yes.
right. We're public.
Right.
And we want to defend the public, okay? And part of the way we defend the public is we advocate with our communities to provide sufficient funds and other kinds of support for the whole system, for all kids.
Right.
You live in Brookline, and you should, right? But what you're talking about, when you say that, you know, you turn these little principles loose as, you know, sort of fundraisers, I think that's a different kind of politics, and I'm not sure how democratic that is. Okay?
Okay.
Because we see a lot of that.
Okay,
We see
question?
too much of it.
Thank you, George.
So I'm going to try to distill.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Sharon Bromwitz on the Brookline School Committee, but I'm a parent, and that's more important. Than this. I think that the conversation that we had reflects some of the dynamics here, which is the tension between school autonomy and sort of district-wide equity. And I personally, as a parent, am not entirely sure that we've managed that our definition of equity as we're applying it in this district right now is really hitting it, because we're moving towards, or we have been moving for quite a few years towards increasing standardization at the schoolhouse level in order to achieve equity, and that may be having counterproductive outcomes. One of the issues that I want to raise, which I think is actually more financial, but which comes up, I mean, in terms of how I'm thinking about it, but came up a lot in sort of side comments that you were making, is about special ed, right? And about the fact that it almost sounds, from the way that you're describing it, that special education is almost an outcome of the instructional model, right? Or rates of special education needs are an outcome of the instructional model, rather than sort of a flat set of conditions that go into the instructional model. The way that we've been, and that has resource implications too, right? The way that we've been dealing with it in our district is we assume that there's kind of a flat level or possibly an increasing level of special education needs that we're going to have to fund, right? But if we're looking potentially at a decline in special education needs, then that liberates resources for the kinds of educational investments that you're talking about: personalized instruction, personalized guidance, increased staff collaboration, and things like that. The question is that takes a leap of faith, right? Like, to basically say, like, we believe that by changing our instructional model, we will find the resources in the decline in special education resources to increase inputs into general instruction that will have a benefit for everybody. And I think that the question that I want to ask you as a leader is, like, how do you bring people through that leap of faith, a community, a staff community, students, and parents. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It's a complex question.
Yeah.
I don't know if I get to that. I would venture to say it starts with your track record, your ability to show that you have success with the various populations in your school. I've always, 20–25% of our population has an IEP. You can look at our results. We're one of the only schools, and I'd say that proudly, that has gone up in test scores from 6th grade through high school. Most, as you know, as a nation, we actually dropped from 3rd grade through 8th grade, right? So to run counter to that and to do it with as diverse population as I had, I think people look at that and they go, wow, how do we create more of that as opposed to how do we take that away, right? And I think that's where I'm talking about supporting other leaders and helping them how to do that. And it means opening up more opportunities. It means giving kids more experiences. I mean, what you didn't ask me is how do you get access to all these opportunities for all kids to be able to thrive? And that is leveraging partnerships. On my website, you can see, and I put it public for everyone. I don't hide the information, right? Our statistics are live. You Google us. We're all on the web. You could find out the schools we work with, the leaders I've worked with. And the reason why I do that is because not everybody's going to come in a direct line to that end result. Some people are going to take time to go through iterations, changes in philosophy, different understandings of how to deal with it, different understandings of what personalized, different, like, that's going to take time. I mean, I committed 17 years of my life to the principalship, right? And I did that purposely because I knew it was going to be a 3-year deal and out. Right? If I really want to make institutional change, it's going to take a life commitment. So that's how I've been able to build that trust with our parents, is because they've seen me. I walk the neighborhoods. I consider myself like the mayor of the neighborhood. I go around kids' houses. I go, like, you have to go out there and know your stakeholders and be able to see you beyond the school, right? Because I don't live and sleep in here. So they got to see me as a regular person. They got to know that I'm listening to their concerns. That trust makes it easier to have that leadership. And
2 more questions.
That's a commitment.
2 more questions. This isn't actually a question. John?
Thank you. I'm John Van Spark. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 13, and more importantly, I have 2 adult children who attended Brookline High School under Dr. Bob, and they turned out okay. They both became lawyers. I don't know what that has to do with Dr. Bob's leadership, but anyway. And this is from the table after some discussion. I'm going to say the phrase principal autonomy, because twice when that phrase was offered during the presentation, there was applause in the room. And I think that raises the question of what are the challenges to achieving principal autonomy? And once achieved, what are the challenges to maintaining it?
It is a combination of what is given and what is taken. You could sit there and say, I only have this, and this is all I'm going to do, because this is the limitation I have. I'm not that kind of principal. I will take some risks. They're not reckless. They may be aggressive. And I do that purposely because for the population I'm dealing with, I have to go out. I feel like I have to go beyond. And so that is how things like having a partnership with a community-based organization that helps us fundraise, that's how we're able to do it. I can't raise more than $1,000 for my parents. So I have to have other needs. So, back to that equity question, that's not going to stop me from getting more for my kids because somebody else is not willing to do that. Right? That's a difference to me. That's not about equity. That might be other isms. So I think it's really important that we, first of all, support each other, build communities of support in terms of principles to help us see models Today that was part of this, is to show models of autonomy so that people then could see it and say, you know what, that's maybe something I want to do. Or see other models, that may be something and be willing to stretch it. Right? I'm willing to stretch it. And that's something that I think has to be developed and taught to people, as opposed to people who inherently will do that. And I think that takes time, and being able to have this safe space for principals to have that discussion, and then having those supervisors who are willing to take a chance on those leaders. And it usually happens with the more experienced leaders. I know at the high school level it happens often, for whatever reason. I'm not sure why it happens as much on the elementary school level. But it's something that I think we have to work on, having it across all the different levels in our system. And that's going to come with people seeing models of it happening.
That was good. It's true.
So the question of what is equity is a complex one that we can happily address another time. But one thing I wanted to say was more a comment than a question.
Jonathan, introduce yourself.
Sorry, Jonathan Norwood. I'm a classroom teacher. I've been a classroom teacher for 17 years. Prior to that time, I spent 20 years in business. I was a manager in business, so I understand something about leadership, whether it was very good at it or not. But really, I wanted to compliment and congratulate Dr. Gonzalez. He couldn't have said it better just a moment ago when he said that this is his life's work. And he tried, and I think did a fantastic job of distilling his life's work into a 30-minute presentation. There's a lot that we could pick at when you distill your life's work into a 30-minute presentation. But as a classroom teacher who is very passionate about his work, sometimes so passionate it gets me in trouble. There was so much in your presentation that resonated with me. We've had a couple of school committee members lead a question. We've had a town meeting member lead a question. I encourage that. But I also encourage you to come talk to classroom teachers and other people who work in the classrooms every day with the children. And that was the big part of Dr. Gonzalez's presentation. And it just meant so much to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your service. What I didn't get to say is I live and die with my staff. You have to love your staff if you want to see the growth that we've seen over time. You have to. You know what I mean? Like, you have to put in. The other things that we didn't talk about is we have multiple teacher levels in the school. Again, I didn't have time to talk about those things. Everything from model teachers to peer collaborative teachers to you got to keep folks that fire going. The job is hard. You have the hardest job. I think if I have great teachers, my job is easy job. I go out and say hi to people and shake hands, and you guys are in there doing the work. So I mean, I know. I've seen it. I've seen the work, and it's a pleasure to see it.
Okay, we're going to also have an opportunity to listen to Ramon. He's on the principals panel as well. So, Ken Ann, you've got the final word.
Oh, look at that. Good morning, Pam McKenzie. I'm in Bob's department, and I'm also a local line parent, and also on the local school site council at our school, Baker. So excited to see you. I always love hearing your talks. A couple of things. We talked here at our table about teacher voice, student voice, which are pretty critical. And I also think like we were a little bothered by, I guess, some of the tension around equality and equity and sort of not, like maybe it sounds like some of the questions were tripping up over the differences between those definitions. And I feel like one of the reasons a school leader needs to get student voice and teacher voice is because that helps them to know what resources they need. And sometimes that means you need more resources than another school, or different kinds of resources. And so I feel like sometimes there's a tension with raising money for resources based on what your school needs versus the assumption that one school has more than the other. So can you talk about that a little bit? Just like, how do you address that issue of, you know, I'm raising money, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a sense that all kids need certain things, and like, what is that? Like, how do you have that discussion with other people who see you raising all this money?
I mean, I think a philosophy that I've always lived by is fairness isn't always equal. right? And I think sometimes people get caught up with just numbers. And when you're dealing with some of the most impoverished communities, like they are 5 steps behind. Forget about it even starting point, right? So it's how do we get to that point where kids can thrive? And so a lot of discussion is really around the issue of mentoring, coaching other leaders to be able to do that. Because again, I could talk about a problem, we could talk about equity, but if we're not taking that next step into action, it's just talk. Right? And so my goal has always been, to live by what you believe and share that with others. And literally share that with others, right? So we have every 2 weeks we have we call it the leadership groups. And we bring all of the leaders. I just did a workshop on fundraising 3 days ago, right? Now, some people are going to walk away from that and say, you know what, I can't do it. I don't have the time. I have my own family. I have other things to do. And I wish I could stop that. But I'm going for the other ones who really want to make a change and just need the knowledge. And that, to me, is the multiplier effect, right? Because now, I'm not only working with 700 kids. I got 700 of those kids, 700 of those kids getting resources, 400 of those kids getting resources. That's why I get up in the morning. I didn't get up and work with 700 kids. I didn't come to Brookline so I could stay with my 700 kids. I'm coming here sharing ideas so I can influence other communities on this goal of how do we get our kids access to resources. Because to me, it's an access issue, right? I mean, it's hard to talk about equity when you can't even get to the table. So I think that's always been my approach is how do we spread that love through knowledge and through skills. And then we can talk about the actual means. But if people don't have the skills to do it, and we hold the skills ourselves, like you have a group here who can raise money, right? Leverage that. Leverage that group to support other schools that can't raise money. It's happened before throughout our nation. But if you keep it in-house and your answer is, we shouldn't raise that much, or we should take away from our population, but we don't want to share with others how to do it, or I think that's a problem. And I think that verges on other issues, I say other isms, racism, classism. Like we can go into those directions. Because you have the means to share it. So what is the restriction? What is restricting us from sharing?